Welcome to Out of the Blue, the podcast, a space where we celebrate powerful real life stories of people who face life changing challenges and found the strength to move forward. I'm your host, Vernon West, and joining me today is my co host, my son, Vernon West III. In addition to being a talented musician, he's also the creative force behind our podcast's logo and theme song. Most importantly, thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and spending your valuable time with us. We truly appreciate your support. And hey, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe. It really helps us to share these stories with more people who need to hear them. Today, we're honored to welcome Will Stratton. Originally from Woodland, California, Will now calls New York's Hudson Valley his home. He's an acclaimed American songwriter, currently on tour in the US and the UK in support of his eighth album, Points of Origin, just released by Ruination Records. Will is here to share a deeply personal and inspirational story, one that began with an unexpected medical crisis and a fight for survival. He'll walk us through his journey of recovery and how he turned trauma into triumph and how he continues to thrive as a musician and artist. Will, welcome to Out of the Blue. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks so much, Vernon. I'm really pleased to be here.
We're so we're so happy to have you. So well, I know a lot of things about you because I did some research, but I do want to know really what's the event we were talking about there that was that deeply personal, inspirational story, the unexpected medical crisis that was out of the blue.
So for a little context, you and I met in person a few weeks ago. I happened to be on tour with a close person in both of our lives, and you were telling us about a story from your life, and it just happened to spark this memory of a specific moment in my life. And when I was in my early to mid 20s, I was kind of I was trying to be kind of a go-getter in music in New York City. I was playing lots of shows. I was working full time, and then I would, play a few shows a week. And I was trying to make things happen in the business, so to speak. And I got very sick with testicular cancer. By the time I had gone to the doctor, it had spread to my lung, it's my liver. And when I was receiving my first round of chemotherapy, I got an email from a professional acquaintance of mine named David Garland, really great guy. He had a wonderful radio show on WNYC called Spinning on Air, and I had been a guest on that show a year or two prior to my getting sick. David at the time didn't know that I was sick when he reached out on this particular occasion, but he was emailing me to ask if I would be a part of his, I think it was the 20th anniversary of Spinning on Air being on the radio. And so the guests were going to be me, Yoko Ono, and Sean Lennon. That was how he pitched it to me.
Wow.
And so I had to say, David, I would love to be a part of this, but I'm really ill. I'm in the hospital right now, so I can't take part. And and he followed up a little bit. I think at the time I was maybe a little bit underplaying the situation, but ultimately, he understood what was going on, and that to me is a moment from my past where I'm like, wow, if I had been healthy or I had gone to the doctor sooner or something, if I had gotten through that crisis a little bit earlier, maybe that would have happened. And then, maybe that chain of events in my life would have resulted in a different trajectory for me. And it's not so much a moment of regret as it is just kind of an inflection point. I'm still alive. I'm in relatively good health now. I'm still thankfully, I'm very grateful to be able to continue making music and pursuing things that are meaningful to me. But I think at the time when we were talking about big breaks or near big breaks, and that was one moment in my life where I was like, I kind of. Uh, it's interesting to examine that moment from multiple angles.
you feel like, wow, this happened. What a time for this to happen. I know exactly what that is. I mean, I had a couple of projects in the fire when I got diagnosed. I mean, I had a book I was writing that was getting a feedback from Houghton Mifflin. They loved it. And all of a sudden I get sick. And now fast forward, that those people haven't been working there anymore. So it's too late for
Right.
that. But but the thing is, it's like when that stuff happens, it's like you have to wonder, like, what is the like I feel we're looking for the benevolence that's
Hmm.
behind these acts that come out of the blue. So like so typically they might, it seems really a rough turn of events maybe took you off of a trajectory, right? But maybe it had a reason for that, because first of all, I wanted to ask you when you were saying, what were for this is probably not just for me, but for people listening, how did you know you were sick? Did you just have started getting sick, fever or pain? What was it that made you get in there?
Well, I mean, with testicular cancer, the tumor is first. So I noticed a lump, and then I, being this, young, early 20s guy, uh, not having a lot of experience with illness or doctors, I put off going to the doctor until I really did feel sick. Which, at the time, there are different levels of denial. I was in denial about it, but I also an aspect of denial is just not wanting to think about something, putting it out of your head. And so I was just kicking the can down the road until it was something that I couldn't turn away from. And you hear about this all the time with testicular cancer and other forms of cancer. I mean, it's a huge part of Lance Armstrong's kind of origin story.
Right,
And I happened to have the same oncologist as Lance Armstrong because I was in a very similar predicament to him. Um, and you hear this a lot with young men, people who haven't encountered significant challenges in their lives, perhaps, and feel like they can just keep on uh, coasting or participating in the same behavior that's led them to that point, when really they're in a crisis and they don't know it yet.
yeah, yeah, it's very much the case for most young men, myself included. You think you're Superman.
Hmm.
You don't
Hmm.
feel like there's ever anything that you can't beat the heck out of.
Yeah.
So when you went in and tell us what happened, I mean, what was that journey? How did that go? How long did it take
Well,
you?
I was in I was in treatment for about a year. I went to a doctor. They sent me to an emergency room. I got admitted to the hospital. Got transferred to another hospital. Got through my first round of chemotherapy. Then I flew with my parents to Seattle, Washington, where they were living, and I got the rest of my treatment done at a hospital in Seattle. So it was another 2 rounds of chemotherapy and a couple pretty serious surgeries, as well as physical therapy and stuff like that afterward. It was a very extensive and harrowing journey. Not, I mean, my own experience of that in some ways is kind of the least of it. It's very hard for the people around you, I think. There are so many internal resources that you don't even know that you have when you're going through something like this. I'm sure this was the case for you too. I
Oh
would
yeah.
imagine, where you're in the thick of it, and um, in my case, a couple of the harder passages of my journey were getting a sepsis infection,
Oh yeah,
living
definitely.
through that,
Oh,
and
that's very
then
tough.
uh, later one of the surgeries was like 28 hours and involved a lot of recovery time. You go through something like that, and your body, I think it's just remarkable to me how resilient the body and the mind can be, especially if you're lucky enough to go through something like this when you're fairly young. Um, and if you're lucky enough to go through a type of the disease where the survival rate is fairly high, which in my case it was. So I got so lucky in a couple of really crucial ways. Uh, my age, the type of cancer I had, and the type of support system I had. I had the option of getting treated in New York or on the West Coast, and I decided to move back in with my parents for a year. As you can imagine, it was a really tough journey, but uh, being on the other side of that is more interesting to me. Like the time immediately after I went through all of this, the sort of insane amount of gratitude that you have to have for surviving something like that, and then what that does to your life. In my case, feeling like I had this second lease on life, it was like, getting cut a blank check from a higher power.
Yeah, from
I felt so good.
oh, that's
And
incredible. I'd love to hear this.
soon after that, I met, reconnected rather with my then partner, now wife, and we've been together for uh, like 13 years at this point. We got married last year, and I
Oh, that's
think that,
congratulations. Wonderful.
thank you. I think that connecting with her was only really possible because of this multi-layered, tumultuous, traumatic journey that I went through. I wouldn't have reached out to her had I not been on the other side of the country recovering from this uh, cataclysmic event in my life. And you never, if you do have the good fortune to make it through something like this alive, you never know what is going to come out of that completely unexpectedly that wouldn't have happened if you didn't go through that kind of traumatic experience. I try not to, I mean, it's been so long now. I try not to dwell too much on the previous versions of myself and uh, those different diverging paths that result from different decisions that I've made in my life. But that's one element of my journey that I'm really grateful for.
Wow, I'll tell you, I could hear some of the highlights that we're going to be taken out of this already. But explosion of gratitude. That's a phrase and a half because that's what I feel like I'm getting. You reminded me of the explosion of gratitude. That's something that's incomparable to anything in your life. And I think that even the people around you get to experience that. It's like when you reached out to your now wife, it's almost like you were sharing that. I feel like that beautiful gratitude. It's something about it, like the second lease on life. Is it? It's like something so special. You feel like you're touched by something outside of yourself. That's even though it probably isn't, because I'm not sure our higher power is outside of ourselves. Probably, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But somehow it touches us with such a powerful way that the gratitude is. I mean, I felt gratitude, and I'm sure you did too, before that happened. But can you
hmm
compare it? It's almost incomparable.
Yeah, I think people's experiences of suffering are so subjective, but people's experiences of gratitude are also really subjective. I forget who I was talking about this with, but you know, it's so tempting for people to look back on their own trauma or suffering, or maybe a family member's, and then say, well, they've gone through something really extreme. You have no idea in your in your own life what that must feel like. I don't think that is true. I think if you're somebody who has it thankfully not experienced something really extreme and traumatic in their life, and you encounter some difficulty, that suffering in experiencing that is no less than the suffering of somebody else because you have no frame of reference for
Oh yeah,
what that
definitely,
other person is going through.
definitely.
And if you flip that around, I think the same thing is true for gratitude in a way. Being a little kid, being grateful for a particularly good Christmas present or something like that.
Oh, definitely, right?
That feeling is honestly very similar to the feeling that I had coming through this, year-long journey with my life and my health relatively intact and being, feeling like I was given this gift by no one in particular, but by the world.
Yep.
Uh,
Life itself, really.
yeah, gratitude is a very relative thing. And I want to echo what you said about not being sure about the existence of a higher power, because I had some very close brushes with death in my experience, and I'm more of a materialist, not I mean, in the philosophical sense, I didn't feel the presence of a singular higher intelligence on the other side of the veil between life and death. But I kind of feel like when people die, they return to a kind of huge, subsuming, universal intelligence that we as single human beings don't have a lot of cognition of, if that
Right,
makes
right,
sense.
right, right. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that a lot. It's tough to figure that stuff out. Obviously, we could talk. That's a whole year worth of podcasts talk about
Yeah.
that. But certainly, when you went on from this, though, the explosion of gratitude, it had to have definitely. Well, one thing I did I read this a long time ago, really in my 20s, because I was trying to figure out happiness, and I was very sad
Hmm.
going through that period of time in my 20s where I wasn't too happy. And I found a book written by a Jesuit about happiness, and he interviewed like 50 people from all walks of life. But he did like a rich person who was happy, a rich person who was miserable, a poor person who was happy, a poor person who was miserable, and everything in between, every other kind of thing you can think of. And what he ended up at the end of the book saying was that the only thing he found that was consistent among all the people who were happy, rich, poor, sick, well, was that they were grateful first. He said that was the only thing he said he could say fixedly, determinedly, that happiness derived from gratitude. It came from gratitude. So what does it mean? I mean, what is happiness anyway? I think of it as joy. I mean, when you said that explosion of gratitude, I just felt an explosion of joy come in my heart, like
Hmm.
because I relate to that. I relate to that extremely because when you're in that near death situation, it's terrifying. That's before I'm honest about that. I was scared out of my pants.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when I finally thought, oh, I'm not going to be history tomorrow and not know
Hmm.
what's where be part of the big oneness and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I'm back and I have another chance. And it was like extremely joyous in that sense. I didn't have an expectation of what I was going to do with my life at that point, but I did feel the fact that I had a second chance was unbelievable. It was just
Yeah.
so wonderful. And
Yeah.
what did you do after this with all that newfound gratitude?
I went through a few different phases. I moved back to New York City. I resumed my old job. I moved in with my girlfriend. I kept making music. In a lot of ways, I resumed the old life that I had had before I got sick, but I did it with a different perspective, and that informed the work that I made, the music that I made. The album that I made immediately after that was called Grey Lodge Wisdom, and it's definitely an album emotionally about the cancer experience of getting weaker and then getting stronger. And once I had made that, it was an enormous relief because I felt like I could write music from a bunch of different perspectives, and I had kind of said what I had to say on that topic, and I could move on from there. And a record I made after that, well, a couple records that I made after that were more kind of heterogeneous, the types of songs that I was making. I was trying new things out, both informed by that particular experience, but also just trying to experiment. And when that approach stopped working, with this last record, for example, it's a concept record and it's about California, mostly California in the 1970s. And it's based on a lot of conversations that I've had with people in my family, especially my parents, and their memories of California, as well as a lot of additional research I did about wildfires. There's kind of this current of wildfires that runs through the album. Um, but as life goes on from an experience like that, I think you do kind of have to, in my case at least, like I found that I couldn't fire on all those cylinders all the time
Mm,
for an extended period of time. Like there's a line between gratitude, which I think you have to try to carry with you for the rest of your life, and mania. And I think that it's possible to go through an experience like that and get a little bit uh, manic if you don't try to get back to a little bit of a regular baseline. It's such an extreme experience and such a life-altering thing, but there's also so much else out there in terms of life to experience. And I found that once once the cancer experience had colored my life in that particular way, because I could move on substantially from that, with the exception of checkups and, all of the uh, medical experience that will follow me for the rest of my life, just because I have been a cancer patient. Um, I feel a need to try to just live a life on terms that are separate from that experience, but informed by it,
mm.
if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I can feel that would inform everything. I mean, it informs, it's not like you can't break from it. It's part of you, but you
Hmm.
do move on. You do move on. It's almost essential, a part of the process.
Yeah, and as life goes on and as I've gotten older, because this happened to me 13 years ago, I've lived a lot more of my life, and I've had other injuries and other illnesses and other like really transcendent experiences. And so even though it's kind of like to use a really clumsy metaphor, it's like my life is a rock garden, and that's one pretty big boulder in the rock garden is that year of my life because it's really dense with sensory experiences and memories that don't pertain to anything else in my life. It exists a little bit outside of it. But there are other big boulders in the rock garden too. And so, yeah, as time goes on, there's an additional layer of gratitude for me, which is that I can, which is that those memories become more ordinary and they become more assimilated into the rest of my life, and they become one more factor that kind of informs my perspective rather than the factor.
Right. Right. So does that, when you sit down to write a song now, you don't think of that. You know what I mean? You're thinking of the inspiration for the song itself.
Hmm.
How would you say it affected your ability to write music?
That's a really good question. I think I was really, when I was a younger person, I was very fixated on seamlessness and perfection and competency and proficiency and, showing off my guitar playing skills and all of these things. I had a lot of vanity as a young artist, and I think one thing that my experience with cancer took away from me was that kind of vanity. Maybe not completely, but it definitely took a lot of it away because
Absolutely. I can actually hear it. I mean, I was I've listened to some of the music. I mean, it's good. Getting more. Uh, it evolves. Your music is evolving, just like you are, which is about as good as it gets, really.
The older I get, I mean, I'm in my late 30s now, so I'm not a young man. I'm not an old man necessarily. Depending on who you talk to, age is a matter of
Right.
perspective, obviously.
I would say you're a young man talking to
Yeah.
me. So,
Well, in any case, I mean, the music I connect with the most right now has to do with living an entire life. It's like, you look at the discography of John Prine or Van Morrison or Joni Mitchell or one of these kind of
oh yeah.
monumental songwriters, you you can pick up an album from different sections of their life and feel some of the kind of fabric of what a life is when you compare it to an album from another period of their life. And that's something that I strive for. I want to make music as I get older that carries some of those feelings of that particular time of my life rather than just trying to be one version of a musician. And this is kind of trite to say. I think it's what a lot of musicians strive for, especially if they keep making music after their 20s or 30s or after, what the industry determines to be their sell-by date.
Oh yeah. Oh my
Because that's
gosh.
something we've talked about too, is there's like a very narrow box that
Oh, so narrow.
yeah, that the industry wants to put you in as much as there is an industry
I
anymore.
think it's the age between 19 and a half and 20 and a half.
Yeah, that's when you're most visually marketable because people will want to be you at that age, but it's also when you're the most naive and the most easy to manipulate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, like it's funny they say that they can manipulate you, but it's also because back in those days, the early music industry selling 45s to of who wears shorts and things like that. They were looking at the youngsters with the disposable income that would go down the street and buy a single for $1.50. But now it's not the case. The industry is totally flipped.
Yeah, the way people consume music, it seems like it's changing all the time now.
Yep.
And I don't have the energy or the inclination to keep up with consumption trends. I really just want to make the music that I can make, and the, everything else, the thoughts that have to be expended about how the music is perceived. I think that those tend to negatively affect my creative process, speaking personally. It actually gets in the way of writing music.
It does. It does. Trying to write for, if for an intentional thing, that's just plain old commercial writing. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
writing for like a toothpaste or something, but if you're really writing music, it's art, and art is something very much numinous. It's uh, how would you feel about it? Vern, how do you reflect on that stuff too? You write songs.
I just came from a band practice last night where we like shot content because we're trying to like work for the algorithm.
Yeah.
And
Oh
yeah,
God.
it does feel like uh it does feel like a necessary evil because you're marketing and it's part of like being in the music industry, I guess. But it is definitely a distraction from the point, which is to create the thing that genuinely comes out of you. And then like hopefully, yeah, hopefully people like that. But yeah, it is very stifling to like concern yourself with like, all right, well, what will make money?
Bands are such a beautiful thing. It's almost like
They really are.
being on a pirate ship or something. Everybody has a different
I like
role.
that.
You can have a member of your band who has to make sure that the band is putting out content for social media, and you can have somebody who's in charge of something else. And that type of collaboration. I do miss that. I stopped being in bands after college, and looking back on it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should try to start another band. It's just really
It's
nice.
motivating.
Yeah, and it's the camaraderie of it and the act of playing music with other people where it's not like one person is writing the songs and being in charge of the arrangement and stuff. The communal aspect of it is really nice too.
I will say it is that. It is one person like writing the songs and like bringing them. But yeah, like I'm the drummer, so I get to offer my interpretation of a song, and it is super collaborative. And it is very rewarding. And I will say this though, it distracts me from my own stuff. So keep going with your own stuff. If that is where you're like true, like where you really feel the most like rewarded for creating,
Yeah.
I'd say stick to that because I'm in a bit of a situation where it's like I hear you and talking about your like journey and you've got a discography and beautiful music, by the way. I
Thank you.
like, and it's also very clear there's an etherealness to the music, which I know, I don't know if it came necessarily from that experience, but it does have a sort of like heavenly kind of like drony quality.
Hmm.
Like the the song on your website from Gray, the what is the name of that album?
Gray Lodge Wisdom.
Gray Lodge Wisdom, yeah. It has like this drone that comes in, and it does feel very like this experience of like I don't know, meditative something has like permeated your life. And then like all the other songs I've listened to after that had a similar quality. So it is
Hmm.
cool to hear how it's you're really like crystallizing this taste or this like style.
Thank you.
It sounds like it's coming from your dedication to like the craft. So that's something that I admire. I'm over here like I got to be in less bands. I'm in four.
Four bands. Okay. That
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
bands.
He's
Yeah.
in a lot
Everyone
of
needs a
bands.
drummer.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to your abilities as a drummer because if you're in demand, that means that you've
Nice.
got something going on.
Yeah, willingness to not be the front man and the kind of
Well, that
the
selflessness is really important too. That can translate into a very fruitful career in music that involves some solo work too. I mean, you look at a lot of prominent sidemen of the past, they put out amazing solo work. I think of somebody like Jackson Brown, who started out like just being a bit player in other people's music, and then really, I may be getting this wrong,
No, I think
but
you're right though. Yeah.
what I when I first thought about Jackson Brown, it was because of his work on well, he wrote a song when I think he was 19 that ended up on a Nico album these days. That's one of my favorite songs, and it just blows me away that he was that young. But he wasn't known as a songwriter until uh, many years after that came out. I think like 5 or 6 years after that, he was putting out solo records, and in between, you know, I think he was doing a lot of work as a sideman in LA, and all of that stuff, I have no doubt informed his work later on. There are just so many stories of people like that. Glenn Campbell is another one where like,
Oh, right, right.
he
Glenn
was this,
Campbell. Right. He was a that. And Jimi Hendrix.
yeah,
He was a side
really
guitar player for the Platters or something, right? I mean,
yeah, he played in a bunch of
yeah.
soul groups. And you can kind of hear that in his guitar playing too. It's like he's thinking of the guitar as a horn section almost. It's like the kind of stabbing stuff that he's doing with the guitar reminds me of like the horn section in James Brown or something like that.
That's so true. I never even, that's
totally
an interesting insight. That's really right on. He definitely did. They think of Foxy Lady.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like a horn
Exactly.
section.
It's like saxophones.
And as a playing in three piece, he probably missed that because he had been in bands with horn sections.
My first band was a ska band, and
Oh, that sounds like fun.
it was
oh
fun.
yeah.
Yeah, and we had a horn section. And aside from that, I've recorded with horns, but I haven't played with a horn section since I was in high school, and I miss it a little bit.
Oh, I bet. I bet. I had one of my earliest experiences was like playing at my cousin's wedding. We got up to play, and they had a whole horn section, and we did Boney Maroney, which is Lennon did that song. It's an old rocker written by Fats Domino, I believe. And when they came in with that horn section, when they act after we sang a verse and then bam, bam, and they did this offsetting horn line, it blew me away. I was so excited. Give me horns. I want more horns. And it's funny because when I first started out trying to get into clubs, I can't tell you how many times we would audition for a club and they would say, well, get a horn. You need horns. Get some horns in the band. We never did, but I think we might have got a sax player for a little while. But really insightful comment, Will. I'm
Oh,
going to remember
thanks.
that forever.
I'm sure I've heard that somewhere else. I don't think that's a Will Stratton
It's not a
original,
Will
but
Stratton. Well, you're
I
going to
don't think
take
so.
for all intents and purposes, we're going to attribute it to you.
Back to your point, Will. I'm kind of hoping that through this process, I'm meeting people and I'm making connections and I'm like hanging out with people, and that's a
Hmm.
big part of it. And like, one of these days, the path will take me somewhere. Then maybe money will be there, maybe a living will be there. It's kind of
Maybe.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And it's always a maybe.
The music industry right now, I want there to be some kind of mass organization around streaming royalties or, you know, something's got to give so that people who are particularly talented and in demand, like yourself, can find their way to a living. Um, and
Yeah.
people's consumption habits just keep changing though, and I think people's attention spans are diminishing somewhat too. It's like
Mhm.
content is starting to overtake music in a way as a focus of people's attention. And to the extent that that's lucrative, I guess that's okay, but
Yeah, it's also part of life. Like that will happen. The media will change the way the way we consume the media will change the media. So now it's like we were filming videos vertical and with the
right,
camera sideways, and it was like, what? This is like now we're trying to do that.
right.
It's in and the same for this in the same like uh, same vein. Music is becoming shorter and more intense and like over super stimulating because of that form. And it's like that's not bad inherently, but it's like different from our sensibilities because I'm early 30s. I grew up without much electronic influence. Like I think Linkin Park was like the closest to I'm digressing, but it's like not bad necessarily, but it's just different, and it sucks for people like us who like appreciate a specific style or approach that is now niche, and there's no way to break through to people that understand it, or it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
So this is the eternal struggle, and I am curious about like, did your experience like sort of make you feel more confident about just consistently pursuing music?
I have tried to be very pragmatic about the way that I approach all of this. Because once I came out of this experience, I could no longer, and this is going to get really uh, very specific about stuff unrelated to music for a second. I could no longer really get health insurance as an individual on a marketplace, even though this was post Obamacare, because I had been on Medicare when I was sick, when I was on Social Security disability, et cetera, et cetera. There are all of these little loopholes that make it hard to get health care for somebody with my medical history, or at least did at the time, right, immediately after my illness. And so I have tried to always at least have a full-time gig that will give me health insurance through my job. And I have tried to pursue music to the best and fullest of my abilities alongside that in parallel with it. So I have needed the stability of full-time employment just I mean for the sake of my immediate family so that they don't worry about me in case something were to happen. I've kind of had to take a particular approach. And has that stopped me from pursuing music all of the time like I would otherwise want to? Yes. I haven't toured as much as I would have, I think, but the grass is always greener. If I didn't have to have a full-time job. That being said, I also wonder if, if the shoe had been on the other foot and I had really tried to make a go of it as a touring musician for a couple years, if I had like tried to do the thing where I live out of my car and I tour all over the United States, like some friends of mine did in the 2010s, more power to them. I really admire people like that for going out and doing that. But that's can be a really hard thing to do for your physical and mental health. And I think it can lead to you kind of burning out if you're not careful, if you really go hard at it. So I think that there's this question of like longevity. It's a really it's what is the phrase from the last waltz. It's anyway, it's an impossible way of life, the life of a professional musician, and it gets more and more impossible. And there are people who make it work. A lot of those people have vast hidden reserves of familial wealth to draw on. Not all of them. There are also very talented people who do make it through this crazy gauntlet of the industry with their self-sufficiency intact just because they are that talented and that dedicated and that lucky. But
All together, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
you got to have all three.
Yeah.
And I think that in my case at least, having the ability to not worry too much about the health side of things, having the ability to have insurance because of the country and political system that we live in has allowed me to also make a lot of music that I wouldn't have made otherwise. So I've made four albums. I've put out four albums since this all happened. That is a slower rate than when I was in my 20s, but uh, I'm still making music, and I really do. I still have goals related to touring. I want to do a tour all over the United States, which I haven't done yet. I've toured a lot in the UK. I've toured a little bit in Europe. I'm going out for a couple of weeks in the UK in July. And each time it's like it's kind of a shot in the dark. I don't know exactly what's waiting for me. Sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes, there's only two people at the show, but uh, the act of writing songs and of playing the music for people who find meaning in it has not gotten any less fulfilling as time has gone on. And I'm very grateful for that, at least.
Well, I think that would be probably we're talking about the thread. One of the things I like to look for with out of the blue things is the thread. There's a thread coming through it. That kind of, to me, informs me personally of where I'm going, if I'm going the right thing. Everything I can't, you have to do that for yourself, obviously. But I hear you, and I think, yeah, you might have said, you did say less hectic pace of album release, but I think of terms of quality is over trumps quantity. And any time in the morning for me,
Yeah,
like you give me 10 songs that are okay, give me one song that's unbelievable. I'm listening to that song the whole time. Forget the other 10. You know what I mean?
right,
So
right.
it's quality, and I think that's what this Out of the Blue event has turned your explosion of gratitude into a, I don't know, a pretty sharp focus on staying in tune with your truth. It seems that way. I mean, on the outside looking in,
Yeah, you use the word thread. There's a poem by William Stafford. It's maybe my favorite poem, called "The Way It Is," and it is all about that following a thread through your life that gives the rest of your life meaning. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
that's exactly what I said. Yep. And I think the when we get in tune with our thread, then you recognize it when things happen. You don't maybe instantly recognize it, but eventually it starts to manifest and you go, yeah, okay. And it informs your feeling going forward. So we can't predict tomorrow, much less the next hour. But we know that when we're making comes to points where you got to make decisions that can change your life. You don't even realize it. It might be the smallest decision, but it's going to set you on a whole nother path. The more people, like we were talking about this the other day, I think about some people don't understand why do bad things have to happen for people to get grateful? because because it's just the way it is. I mean, lots of times people go through life and they coast and they God bless them, they never have anything really critically earth shaking happen to them, but they're grateful and they think they're grateful and they probably are. But is that the kind of explosion of gratitude that we're talking about here? Because when you have the earth shaking thing happen from out of the blue, I feel that's a I have to say it. I hope God isn't listening to me or my higher power. Please don't listen to this. All right. I am saying it was like what I needed.
Hmm.
What happened to me, I needed it to happen. I needed to have my head shaken up because I was so complacently thought I had it figured out. And I just thought it was, I just can't believe how much I've changed from that
Yeah.
as a result of that event. And I look at my old self, I'm not mad at me. I mean, I had, raise a family. I had to bring money in. I was always focused on making money. And no, but I look at it now, it's so much different. I think maybe it's because I did save. I know I put a lot of time in. Now I have the ability to say, do what I really feel and love
Hmm.
first and foremost. I feel like that's what I've learned about my life now. And when I hear you talking, I think that's exactly what you're learning and you're evolving in that way, that the things that are important in your life, I mean, yeah, you have to have a job for the medical and that stuff, but it doesn't preclude writing these great songs you're putting out and then going on the tours when you can do it. And I think something will unfold and you'll know when it's time to do that national tour.
Yeah, the stability is important in my case. Some people need some chaos in their lives to be creatively productive, or I, I've always tried to when I was really young, yeah, my dad was an English professor. He's now retired, and had a bunch of other careers as well. But he has a love of poetry that he passed on to me. And when I would write poems as a young person, it was from a perspective of trying to transcend earthly things, trying to, transcend day-to-day experiences. And for better or for worse, that's been kind of my approach as a songwriter too. I'm not a super earthy songwriter. I think because of that kind of poetic background, and for me at least, I can only get to that kind of slightly disinterested, above ground perspective from a fairly stable place. And that stability, that's what I get from not having to worry so much about the day to day and putting in time at a job. I really admire people like Charles Ives, this great American composer who worked as, was one of the founders of the American insurance industry for better or worse, or William Carlos Williams, who was a medical doctor and was also writing these beautiful poems. I think there's,
Brian
uh,
May, isn't he like an astrophysicist
yeah, yeah,
or rocket scientist or something like that?
yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, this art is not mutually exclusive, but intelligence being a form of art.
Yeah,
But continue, yeah, because I agree. Those inspired the hell out of me.
yeah. I mean, I really admire people whose central core part of their identity is they are an artist, and that is how they interact with the world. But for me, because that hasn't been the only part of my journey, that balancing act and the kind of stability I get from the other parts of my life have informed the way that I make music. And in terms of like all of musical history, I think there have been these very brief periods in society where people are allowed to make a living as a musician. And we're kind of looking back, we've had a very fertile, commercially fertile period of music making. And there was, the period of when sheet music was selling like hotcakes. And there's all of the stories of like composers, it's being taken under the wing of various monarchs and aristocrats in Europe and being part of a patronage system, kind of like the great visual artists of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment era and all of that. And these examples stick in our mind because they are such a pivotal part of our cultural history. But there's also all of these periods where it's been very, very difficult to subsist as musicians. And I'd like to think that the music that was made in those periods was just as trenchant and a just as important a part of that society, even if it wasn't uh, being remunerated, being compensated with the value that we would ascribe to it.
Yeah, it probably was, and people were still probably sort of against their will creating stuff that was really heart wrenching, just of the times of their experience. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. If and it's a shame that maybe these periods of time the music is a mystery, but there's also something really like beautiful about that too, like how it is ethereal.
Music is the most, it's one of those arts that comes directly out of the blue. I mean, when you're performing it and the audience is listening, you don't know exactly how they're hearing it because they're interfacing with your music and their frame of reference with reality. So its impressions are totally out of your control. It's like anytime you write anything, you have to realize now it's in the hands of the listener or the reader, and they're going to create from your creation the experience. And I've seen it over my life. We may not have had a hit record that was global, but for the people we played it for, it was a fab part of the fabric of their lives. And for that, I'm I get much joy from that. So it doesn't matter if my band didn't, I don't get to go on a nostalgia tour right now, you know, and play for a bunch of people that said, yeah, that's a great song. But if I did, to the people that heard me, they are that way. And
Hmm.
there was a time I think that there were musicians all over the country doing the same thing. Because while the industry may have been ignoring us and making us subsist and gradually taking away the livelihood of musicians, which is, I don't think they meant to do it. It's just what unfolded after the pandemic and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think whatever it is, it's going to force us, musicians, artists, to come up with even better stuff to break through that wall of noise. And ultimately, music is needed for that connection to the ethereal. What did someone? Well, I think one said it's the bridge between the physical world and the non-physical world, the spiritual world, for lack of a better term. And music or art is the bridge to that. And I think music is the most vibrant form of of any art on the planet that does that. It stirs the emotions up. I mean, think about what it does. I mean, they use music to march and get people ready to start a war. It's that powerful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we are in our hands, in your hands, Will, taking that out of the blue state, and Vernon too, and myself, but I'm a little bit older now. But the thing, it doesn't stop me from making music. But still, by the
Right.
same token, it's like our duty as artists to keep the fire, keep the golden chalice from spilling as we bring the offering to the minds and hearts of those people who are hungry for it. What a great story you have, Will. I mean, it's just a wonderful story of how that event happened in your, I like to call them the terrible 20s, when we all go through them, as we're a little cuckoo and we're a little wildly driven. I mean, gosh, the amount of drive you have when you're in your 20s is off the charts.
Yeah.
And if you're channeling it, maybe that was your out of the blue force saying, all right, we want to help you channel it better. We want to get you some real perspective here. And maybe that's what happened.
I did. I did get perspective. And yeah, coming out of that event, the thing I kept on telling people, and I could tell they didn't completely believe me, was that I wasn't regretful about what happened because of what it gave me. Those experiences are really important to the person I became.
And I will say that speaks to you and my dad, your resilience, like your personal resilience. Because I think a lot of times people like me that haven't really, I mean, I've experienced family members going through things, but I haven't been through physical, intense things. There's a feeling like, oh, it was meant to happen to you, so you learn this lesson. And I haven't needed to learn a lesson, so it hasn't happened to me. But I think that's a load of BS because that's like really hindsight biasy. It is really, and it's selling yourself short. It's a testament to how friggin' strong you guys are that you would go through this and be like, you know what? After all that, this is the good I could take from it. Like that's a choice. Not everyone, I don't think, reverts to that, but that is like a testament truly to your guys's spirit. And maybe there's something to being an artist, having that connection, being willing to find inspiration from this experience. I mean, I commend both of you guys. I think you guys are clearly, you have a humility and appreciation for life that I'm inspired by
Oh,
just sitting
thanks.
here on
Well,
my
Vern,
laptop.
Vern, I'm going to say one thing. Don't underestimate what it's like to have your father or a loved one go through this thing. Because
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked.
when my father went through it and he died eventually, that did it for me. That was my first out of the blue event that made me appreciate and find something very special about my life. The second chance of my own life, though, that's a heavy one. But when you've experienced it, you and your sisters and my family have all experienced it going through this with me. Not to mention, I got to give you guys also the kudos for having gone through the pandemic, which is no small thing for individuals to endure. And that goes for
And it's
you and everybody out there listening. You've all been through something just as heavy as anything. So you can make it turn your life into one big explosion of gratitude if you try.
Yeah, absolutely.
right. It's like we said, it's these things are subjective. So
Yeah.
it how they affect you and your perspective is what is most important. If you stub your toe on a rock and then you decide to, work for a charity because there's too much suffering in the world, like, like all the power to you. If that's what triggers it, amazing. And I definitely appreciated the growth that we went through after that as a family.
Yeah, and I think it benefited everybody. Unfortunately, sorry to say that, God, I know you don't want to do another one to us, right? Higher power. But it was really helpful. It did help us a lot. I mean, and I hope that, anyone listening here today to our wonderful story from Will Stratton can see that you can go through these things. You can still come out the other end with an explosion of gratitude and a new way to look at life. That is a new paradigm, a new shift that you can move your life forward. And boy, oh boy, thank you so much, Will, for sharing your story with us today. It's been an
Thank you for having me.
incredible podcast. Vernon, you want to say something?
One last thing. I had an old high school friend recently die because of testicular cancer. He was my age, he was like 32. This is Brian Bell, Dad.
Oh, wow.
Um, he was, a young man and he was too proud to admit something was wrong and it became too late and it took his life.
I'm
So I will
really,
say,
I'm
yeah,
sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to interrupt you too,
no,
but I'm the the reason I still talk about this in settings like this is with the hope that it will find people who might be in similar situations. And having told these stories over and over again, I know that they have made a difference, but I'm so sorry for your loss.
well, thanks. Well, of course, it's it's life. That's one of the things that's going to happen. But yeah, if we can make that, make one person who's a little uh insecure or scared get over that just to get it checked and give them a little more time, then hell yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
Appreciate
That's
second
you
it.
doing
that.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And before I say bye, one little act of shameless promotion here with my cup, folks. You know you can
And the
buy this
sweater.
and the sweater. But also don't forget, we're going to post some links for Will Stratton. You got to get his music. Go get a hold of it on Spotify or go to Bandcamp and just go to his website and you can find it all. So thank you so much for joining us, Will. It's really been an amazing pleasure.
Thanks so
Thank you
much,
so
Will.
much. Thank you to
Uplifting.
both Vernons.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Both Vernon. It's a double Vernon. You got the two barrel Vernon at you. But thank you
Vernon
so
1 and Vernon 2.0.
yeah, the new version
Yeah,
and improved. All right, but thank you so much for everything, Vernon. Thank you for co-hosting with me. I can say it.
of
I know I
course.
can. Thank you so much for joining us. Those of you, please smash the like buttons and click the follow because every little bit helps. And thank you from here of us, all of us here at Out of the Blue. Have a wonderful day and don't question it. Get an explosion of gratitude from it. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everybody. Out of the Blue, the podcast, hosted by me, Vernon West, co-hosted by Vernon West III, edited by Joe Gallo, logo and theme song by Vernon West III. Have an Out of the Blue story of your own you'd like to share? Reach us at info@outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. Subscribe to Out of the Blue on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and on our website, outoftheblue-thepodcast.org. You can also check us out on Patreon for exclusive content.
Good news when it just strings you along.